Captain Jake Morrison stood at the wide window of the diplomatic ship Eons Meridian, watching the stars drift by in the endless darkness of space. His hands were behind his back, fingers clasped tight as he tried to keep his anger under control. 3 years. 3 long years of talking, negotiating, and begging for peace while human colonies burned. The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, walked up behind him. Her face was pale and her eyes looked tired. She had been reading reports from the outer colonies all morning, and each one was worse than the last. "Sir, we just got another message from New Haven Colony," she said quietly. "The Zephyrians hit them 2 days ago. The entire settlement is gone. 2,000 people, including 400 children." Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. New Haven had been one of the newest human colonies, built by families looking for a fresh start among the stars. Now it was nothing but ash and melted metal. "How many survivors?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from her voice. "None. Sir, they glassed the entire planet from orbit. The coalition ships didn't even land. They just erased everything." Jake turned away from the window and looked at Amy. She was young, maybe 25, and had joined the diplomatic corps because she believed in peace. Now she was learning what that belief cost when the other side didn't share it. "Get me Admiral Rick Hayes on the secure channel," Jake said. "And tell Ambassador Lisa Carter that the coalition representatives will be here in 1 hour." Amy nodded and hurried away. Jake walked to his private office and sat down at his desk. On the wall hung pictures of his wife and 2 daughters back on Earth. They lived in a small town in Colorado, far from the war zones and alien attacks. Sometimes he wondered if they truly understood what was happening out here in the dark between the stars. The secure communication panel lit up, and Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen. The old man looked tired and angry, his gray hair messy, and his uniform wrinkled. Behind him, Jake could see the busy command center of the military base on Mars. "Jake, please tell me you have good news," Hayes said. "I wish I did, Rick. New Haven is gone. The coalition is pushing further into our space every week, and they're not even trying to hide their attacks anymore." Hayes rubbed his forehead with one hand. "The politicians back on Earth are still saying we need to keep trying diplomacy. They think the coalition will eventually listen to reason. What do you think?" Jake asked. Hayes was quiet for a moment, then leaned closer to the camera. "I think they see us as weak prey animals, Jake. Every time we try to talk instead of fight, they think we're afraid. Every colony they destroy without punishment makes them bolder. The coalition representatives are coming aboard in an hour for what they're calling final negotiations. War Master Thekvor himself is leading their group." "Thekvor?" Hayes looked surprised. "He's their top military commander. They don't send him unless they're planning something big, or unless they want to deliver a message that can't be misunderstood," Jake said. After ending the call with Hayes, Jake walked to the main meeting room where the negotiations would take place. The room was large and bright, with a long table in the center and chairs arranged for both human and alien delegates. Ambassador Lisa Carter was already there, reviewing her notes and preparing for another round of careful diplomatic language. Lisa was in her 50s, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She had spent most of her career negotiating trade deals and border agreements with peaceful alien species. The Coalition War was her first experience with truly hostile aliens, and Jake could see the stress wearing on her. "Any word from Earth about our negotiating position?" she asked as Jake sat down across from her, same as always. "Offer them trading rights, territorial concessions, whatever they want as long as they stop attacking our colonies?" Lisa shook her head. "Jake, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can read people, human or alien. The coalition doesn't want our territory or our trade goods. They want us gone? They see humans as a threat to their expansion plans. Then what are we doing here? Going through the motions, following orders, hoping that somehow, some way, we can find words that will make them stop killing our people." The meeting room doors opened and the coalition representatives entered. War Master Thekvor led the group, his massive form filling the doorway. He was 8 feet tall with gray skin like stone and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. His species, the Zephyrians, were the most aggressive members of the coalition, and HFY was known for his brutality even among his own people. Behind him came representatives from the other coalition species. The tall, thin Nexari with their pale blue skin and large black eyes. The heavily armored Koroth who looked like walking tanks made of metal and flesh. The snake-like Selenites who never seemed to blink as they watched everything with cold intelligence. All of them had one thing in common. When they looked at the humans, their expressions showed the same thing Jake had seen in predators back on Earth. When they looked at prey animals, contempt, hunger, the certainty that they were superior. HFY settled into his specially made chair with a sound like grinding stone. His 4 eyes focused on Lisa, then moved to Jake, studying them like a scientist might study interesting insects. "Ambassador Carter?" "Captain Morrison," HFY said in heavily accented English. "I hope you have something new to offer today." The coalition grows tired of these meaningless conversations. Lisa opened her folder and began reading from her prepared statement. The United Nations of Earth once again calls for an immediate ceasefire in all contested systems. We are prepared to offer significant territorial concessions and favorable trade agreements in exchange for a permanent peace treaty. One of the Nexari representatives made a sound that might have been laughter. "More territory? More trade deals? Do you think we are merchants haggling over the price of grain? What do you want?" Jake asked directly, breaking diplomatic protocol. Lisa shot him a warning look, but he continued. "Tell us what it will take to end this war." HFY leaned forward, his massive form looming over the table. "What we want, Captain Morrison, is simple. We want you humans to understand your place in this galaxy. You are a young species, barely out of your home system, yet you act as if you belong among the established powers." "We've never claimed to be a major power," Lisa said carefully. "We've always sought peaceful coexistence with all species." "Peaceful coexistence," another coalition representative repeated. "Yes, that is exactly the problem. You spread your colonies across dozens of systems. You establish trade routes and defensive pacts. You act as if you have the right to exist as equals among species who have ruled the stars for thousands of years." Jake felt his anger rising but forced himself to stay calm. "So this is about keeping us in our place? This is about teaching you that there are consequences for overreaching," HFY said. "Every human colony we destroy sends a message. Every ship we capture, every prisoner we take for our research facilities, shows other young species what happens when they grow. Too ambitious too quickly." The words hit Jake like physical blows. Research facilities. They weren't just killing human prisoners. They were experimenting on them. Lisa's face had gone completely white. "You're torturing our people." "We are studying you," the Nexari representative corrected. "Learning how human bodies and minds work. The information will be useful when we decide how best to manage your species after we have conquered your homeworld." Jake started to stand up, his hand moving toward the sidearm he wore at his belt. Lisa grabbed his wrist and pulled him back. Down, but not before every alien in the room had noticed the movement. HFY made that grinding sound again, which Jake realized was laughter. "There it is. The animal instinct beneath your civilized words. You want to fight, don't you, Captain? You wanted to draw your little weapon and try to hurt us." "I want you to stop murdering innocent people," Jake said through clenched teeth. "Innocent?" HFY stood up, his full height making him tower over everyone else in the room. "Captain Morrison, there are no innocent humans. Every one of your colonies is a potential military base. Every human child will grow up to be a soldier or a breeder for more soldiers. Your entire species exists to expand and consume just like the parasites on your homeworld." The War Master walked around the table until he was standing directly behind Jake's chair. Jake could feel the alien's breath on the back of his neck, could smell the metallic scent of his skin. "We have studied your history, Captain. We know what humans are capable of when they stop pretending to be civilized. We have seen the wars you fought among yourselves before you reached the stars, the weapons you created, the cities you destroyed, the millions of your own kind that you killed without hesitation. HFY placed one massive clawed hand on Jake's shoulder. That is why we must act now, while you are still weak and scattered. Before you remember what you really are beneath all this talk of peace and diplomacy. Jake slowly turned in his chair to look up at the War Master. And what do you think we really are? Monsters, HFY said simply. The most dangerous species this galaxy has ever produced. Killers who learned to wear the mask of civilization but never forgot how to take it off. The War Master returned to his seat and looked at both human negotiators. Commander Beth Turner had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. She stood in a room that officially did not exist, deep beneath the surface of Luna Base, surrounded by screens showing star maps and fleet positions across half the galaxy. For her entire career, she had lived in the shadows, preparing for the day when humanity would need to reveal what they really were. The message from Admiral Hayes was simple: Protocol 7 authorized. Beth typed her command codes into the secure terminal and watched as systems that had been dormant for decades began to wake up. Across human space, sleeper agents received their activation signals. Hidden weapons came online. Ships that had pretended to be cargo haulers and research vessels began their transformation into instruments of war. "Ma'am, all stations are reporting ready," said Lieutenant Danny Brooks, our communications officer. Danny was young, but he had been born into the shadow programs. His parents had been agents too, and he had grown up knowing that someday humanity might need to fight for their survival. "Good, begin Phase 1. Wake up our people." On the mining station series, Foreman Bill Carter was welding support beams when his work tablet beeped with an urgent message. Bill had been a sergeant in the Earth Defense Force before taking the mining job 10 years ago. The message was coded, but he understood it perfectly. He set down his tools and walked to what appeared to be a maintenance closet. Inside, hidden behind a false wall, was enough military equipment to arm 50 people. Bill smiled for the first time in months. Finally, the waiting was over. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. The merchant Captain Linda Hayes received her activation signal while docked at a trade station in the Proxima system. She gathered her crew in the cargo hold and pressed a hidden switch. The walls slid away to reveal rows of advanced weapons and armor. Her merchant vessel began to unfold like a deadly flower, revealing gun ports and missile launchers that had been concealed beneath false hull plating. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda announced to her crew, "we are no longer traitors. As of now, we are the UN's Ghost Rider, and we have work to do." Commander Beth Turner watched the reports coming in from across human space. Every major trade route had at least 3 disguised warships. Every important colony had a hidden garrison of trained soldiers. Every research station was actually a military outpost. For 30 years, humanity had been preparing for this day. While pretending to be nothing more than peaceful explorers and merchants, the Coalition had made one crucial mistake. They assumed that humans thought like other species. Most aliens separated their military and civilian populations. Their merchants were merchants, their scientists were scientists, and their soldiers were soldiers. They could not imagine a species where nearly everyone had some level of military training. Beth opened a communication channel to the space station New Geneva, orbiting Jupiter. The station appeared to be a civilian research facility studying the gas giant's moons. In reality, it was the command center for the Sol Systems Defense Network. "Colonel Danny Brooks, this is Commander Turner. Report status." Danny appeared on the screen, wearing a military uniform instead of his usual civilian clothes. Behind him, Beth could see technicians working at control stations that had been hidden behind false walls just hours ago. "Ma'am, New Geneva is fully operational. All weapon platforms are online and ready. The orbital defense grid is active. Jupiter's moons are showing their true colors," Beth nodded. Each of Jupiter's major moons housed massive military installations disguised as mining operations. Europa Base alone had enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. The Coalition intelligence services had visited these facilities dozens of times over the years, never realizing they were looking at fortress worlds. "What about our sleeping ships?" Beth asked. "All vessels in the Sol system have received their activation codes. The merchant marine is transforming as we speak. Even our oldest cargo haulers are showing their teeth." Beth switched to another channel, connecting with Captain Steve Reynolds aboard what appeared to be a scientific research vessel near Saturn. Steve had been pretending to study the planet's rings for 3 years, while actually commanding one of humanity's most advanced stealth warships. "Steve, what's your status?" "Commander, the UN's Phantom is fully operational. We've been running silent tests on our new weapon systems. The Coalition won't know what hit them." Beth allowed herself a small smile. The Phantom was equipped with technology that the Coalition thought humans were decades away from developing. Weapons based on principles that other species considered too dangerous to research. Humanity had spent the last 30 years pushing the boundaries of physics while their enemies assumed they were too peaceful to create anything truly destructive. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic ship UNS Meridian, Captain Jake Morrison was preparing to send a message that would change everything. He stood in what the Coalition believed was a simple communication room, but which was actually a broadcasting station powerful enough to reach every corner of the galaxy. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood beside him, no longer wearing her diplomat's clothing. Instead, she wore the uniform of a commander in the Earth Defense Force. Like many civilians in the diplomatic corps, Lisa had extensive military training and combat experience. "Are you sure about this, Jake?" she asked. "Once we send this message, there's no going back to the way things were." Jake looked at the communication panel, thinking about the children who had died on New Haven Colony, about the human prisoners being tortured in Coalition research facilities, about his own daughters back on Earth who deserved to grow up in a galaxy where humanity was respected rather than hunted. "Lisa, we tried their way for 3 years. We offered them everything they wanted except our surrender. They chose to see our kindness as weakness. Now they get to see what we're really like when we stop being kind." Jake activated the galaxy-wide BROADCAS TUM. His message would reach every inhabited world, every space station, every ship with a communications array. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Nations Defense Force, broadcasting on all frequencies to every species in the galaxy. For 3 years, the Zephyrian Coalition has attacked human colonies, murdered our people, and tortured our prisoners. They have rejected every offer of peace, every attempt at compromise, every effort to resolve this conflict through diplomatic means." Jake paused, knowing that his next words would be studied and analyzed by historians for centuries to come. "The Coalition believes that humanity is weak because we prefer talking to fighting. They think our restraint comes from fear rather than choice. They have made the mistake of assuming that because we can be civilized, we have forgotten how to be savage. On Coalition worlds across the galaxy, military commanders and political leaders stopped what they were doing to listen to the human captain's words. Most of them were amused. The idea that humans could pose a real military threat seemed ridiculous. The Coalition has 72 hours to withdraw all forces from human space and release all human prisoners. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is your final warning." Jake looked directly into the camera, his expression calm, but his eyes hard as steel. "You wanted to see what humans are really like beneath our civilized mask. You wanted to know what we're capable of when we stop pretending to be peaceful. You're about to find out." The transmission ended, and Jake turned to Lisa. "Send the activation codes to all our deep cover operatives. It's time for the Coalition to meet the real human race." Across the galaxy, Coalition intelligence officers scrambled to understand what they had just heard. Military analysts pulled up files on human capabilities, trying to determine if the broadcast was a bluff or a genuine threat. Most concluded that humanity was attempting to frighten them into backing down without actually having the power to enforce their ultimatum. They were wrong. on the coalition border world of Kepler 442b, a human agricultural specialist named Tom Wilson was tending to crops that fed half the planet's population. Tom had been on Kepler for 5 years, trusted by the local Nexari government and completely ignored by their security forces. What they didn't know was that Tom had been a demolitions expert in the Earth Defense Force before becoming a farmer. Tom received his activation signal and smiled. The crops he had been tending contained more than just food. Hidden beneath the agricultural domes were enough explosives to cripple the planet's ability to feed itself. But Tom's real mission was even more important than sabotage. He walked to his personal quarters and opened what appeared to be a simple storage container. Inside was a compact but powerful communication array that had been sending information back to Earth for 5 years. The Coalition had never suspected that their most trusted human residents were actually intelligence operatives. Similar scenes played out on Coalition worlds throughout their territory. Human civilians revealed themselves as trained agents. Cargo shipments that had been delivered over the years turned out to contain hidden weapons and supplies. Communication networks that the Coalition thought were secure had been compromised for decades. Commander Beth Turner watched the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. Operation Sleeping Giant was proceeding perfectly. Admiral Gary Stone stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching the Coalition fleet approach Earth's solar system. 300 ships, the largest force the Coalition had ever assembled, moving in perfect formation toward humanity's home world. The alien commanders were confident they would crush human resistance in a matter of hours. They had no idea. They were flying into a trap that had been 30 years in the making. Admiral, the Coalition fleet is passing the orbit of Pluto, reported Captain Kate Bennett from her position at the tactical station. Kate had spent the last 5 years pretending to be a cargo ship captain, running supplies between Earth and the outer colonies. In reality, she was one of humanity's most experienced combat officers. "Let them come closer," Gary said calmly. "We want them to feel safe until it's too late to retreat." The Coalition fleet continued its approach, led by War Master HFY aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel was twice the size of any human ship and bristled with weapons designed to glass entire planets. Behind it came destroyers, cruisers, and carrier ships filled with fighters that had never lost a battle. "Sir, they're broadcasting." "Surrender demands," reported the communications officer, Lieutenant Ryan Walsh. "War Master HFY is ordering us to power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded." Gary smiled. "Send them a response. Tell them we decline their generous offer." As the Coalition fleet passed Neptune's orbit, the first surprise revealed itself. What had appeared to be a small research station suddenly unfolded like a mechanical flower, revealing weapon systems that shouldn't have existed. The station opened fire with energy beams that cut through the Coalition's lead destroyers like paper. "That's impossible," growled HFY as he watched 3 of his ships explode in brilliant flashes of light. "Human weapons can't penetrate." "Our shields?" His tactical officer, a thin Nexari named Kethsil, studied the readings with growing alarm. "War Master, these energy signatures don't match any known human technology. The power output is beyond what their reactors should be capable of producing." Similar surprises awaited the Coalition fleet at every turn. Jupiter's moons revealed themselves as massive fortress worlds, their surfaces opening to expose gun batteries and missile silos. The asteroid belt came alive with hidden defense platforms that had been disguised as mining equipment for decades, but the greatest shock came when the human fleet finally showed itself. "Coalition vessels, this is Admiral Gary Stone of the United Earth Defense Force." Gary broadcast to the enemy fleet. "You are trespassing in sovereign human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." HFY laughed, a sound like grinding stone that echoed through his bridge. "Admiral Stone, I see perhaps 50 human ships. We have brought 300. Your mathematics are poor." "War Master, you're not very good at counting," Gary replied. "Computer, execute transformation protocol." Across the human fleet, ships that had appeared to be simple cargo haulers and passenger vessels began to change. Hull plating slid away to reveal hidden weapon systems. False sections detached to expose armored warships that had been hiding inside civilian vessels. What had looked like 50 helpless targets suddenly became a fleet of 200 advanced warships. "This is impossible," Ketsil whispered. "Our intelligence report said humans had no significant military fleet." "Your intelligence was wrong," Gary said over the open channel. "We've been building this fleet for 30 years while you assumed we were too peaceful to prepare for war. Every merchant ship, every passenger liner, every cargo hauler you've seen in human space was actually a disguised warship." The battle began in earnest as both fleets opened fire. The coalition had superior numbers and firepower, but they quickly discovered that humans had advantages they hadn't expected. Human ships moved differently, using tactics that no other species had ever developed. Instead of the rigid formations that dominated galactic warfare, human vessels fought like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attacks while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to changing conditions. Captain Ryan Walsh piloted his fighter through the chaos of the battle, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge energy blasts that would have destroyed any other pilot. Ryan had been born on Mars and had grown up in the low-gravity environment, giving him advantages that Earth-born humans didn't possess. But more importantly, he had been trained in the human style of warfare that emphasized individual initiative and creative thinking. "Volf leader to all fighters," Ryan broadcast to his squadron. "Forget the standard attack patterns. Hunt them like we learned in The Sims. Make them afraid to predict where you'll be next." Human fighter pilots had always been superior to their alien counterparts because they embraced chaos instead of fearing it. Where alien pilots relied on computer-assisted targeting and predetermined flight paths, humans used intuition and improvisation. They flew like their ancestors had fought on Earth, using every advantage they could find or create. Colonel Kate Bennett led the boarding assault on a disabled coalition cruiser, her enhanced soldiers moving through the ship's corridors with predatory grace. Kate's troops were the product of decades of genetic enhancement and training, designed to be the perfect soldiers for close combat in the confined spaces of starships. The coalition defenders had never faced anything like them. Human soldiers moved too fast, thought too quickly, and adapted too easily to alien tactics. They used the ship's own systems against its crew, turning lights into weapons and atmosphere into poison. Every human soldier was trained to see potential weapons in everything around them. "Colonel, we've secured the engine room," reported Sergeant Paul Martinez over the comm. "These aliens fight like they're following a manual. No creativity, no adaptation when their standard tactics fail." "That's because they've never had to evolve like we did," Kate replied as she led her team toward the bridge. "They became the dominant species on their worlds through size and strength, not intelligence and cooperation. They don't understand that humans are persistence predators." The concept of persistence hunting was foreign to most alien species. They either overwhelmed their prey with superior force or gave up when initial attacks failed. Humans had evolved to chase their prey for days or weeks, never giving up, always adapting their strategy until they achieved their goal. This evolutionary advantage showed itself throughout the battle. When coalition ships retreated, human vessels followed them. When alien formations broke apart, human ships reformed and attacked from new angles. When the coalition tried to regroup, they found human forces already waiting for them. Dr. Amy Johnson worked frantically in the depths of the research station New Geneva, putting the finishing touches on weapons that would have terrified the coalition if they had known about them. Amy had spent 15 years pretending to study Jupiter's atmospheric conditions, while actually developing weapons based on principles that other species considered too dangerous to explore. "Dr. Johnson, we need those gravity weapons online now," came the urgent message from Admiral Stone. "The coalition is bringing up their heavy cruisers." Amy smiled as she activated the systems she had spent years perfecting. Across the battle zone, coalition ships suddenly found themselves caught in artificial gravity fields that twisted their hulls like paper and compressed their crews into paste. The weapons violated several galactic treaties on prohibited military technology, but humanity had never signed those treaties. "This is what happens when you mistake our restraint for inability," Amy muttered as she watched coalition vessels being torn apart by forces they couldn't understand or counter. War Master HFY stood on his bridge, watching his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had underestimated in every possible way. Half his ships were gone, and the humans showed no signs of slowing their assault. Every tactical manual he had studied, every battle plan he had developed, proved useless against opponents who refused to fight according to established rules. "War Master, we should retreat," urged Kethsil. "These humans are not what we thought they were. They're not weak prey animals. They're apex predators who have been hiding their true nature." "No," HFY growled. "We came here to crush humanity once and for all. We will not be defeated by creatures who should be grateful we allowed them to exist." He opened a channel to his remaining ships. "All vessels, target the human homeworld. If we cannot defeat their fleet, we will destroy their planet." The coalition ships turned toward Earth, their planet-killing weapons charging for a bombardment that would end human civilization forever. But as they moved into position, they discovered that humanity had one more surprise waiting for them. The space around Earth suddenly filled with ships. Not the disguised vessels that had been fighting the coalition fleet, but true warships that had been hidden in the shadow of the moon. Hundreds of them, each one bristling with weapons and armor that represented the absolute pinnacle of human military technology. "War Master HFY," came Admiral Stone's voice over the communication channel. "You made one critical error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that what you saw was all we had. You thought our merchant marine was our fleet, our colonies, were our fortresses, and our diplomats were our leaders." General Lavra Martin stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface, watching as red dots disappeared from the galaxy map one by one. Each dot represented a coalition military base, and each disappearance meant that human forces had successfully completed another objective. The counteroffensive had been running for 6 weeks, and the coalition was falling apart faster than anyone had expected. "General, we just received confirmation from the Kepler sector," reported Major Bill Henderson, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "The coalition's main shipyard is completely destroyed. Agent Tom Wilson and his team used the food distribution network to place explosives throughout the facility." Lavra nodded, making another mark on her tactical display. Tom Wilson had been posing as an agricultural specialist for 5 years, slowly gaining the trust of the local coalition authorities. When the war began, he had used that trust to deliver devastating strikes against targets that should have been impossible to reach. "What about the prison facilities?" Lavra asked. "Any word on our people?" "We've liberated 3 more camps this week," Major Henderson replied. "Captain Steve Reynolds led the assault on the research facility in the Vega system. He recovered 200 human prisoners, though many of them will need extensive medical treatment." Laura's jaw tightened. The coalition's research facilities had been torture centers where human prisoners were subjected to experiments that violated every rule of civilized warfare. The reports from liberated prisoners painted a picture of systematic cruelty that made Lavra understand why humanity had needed to drop all pretense of mercy. "How many coalition worlds have requested surrender terms?" she asked. 17 so far, and the number is growing every day. The Nexari government sent another message this morning begging for negotiations. Apparently their military commanders are refusing to fight human forces after what happened at Proxima. Lavra allowed herself a grim smile. The Battle of Proxima had been a masterpiece of psychological warfare. When coalition reinforcements arrived to retake the system, they found their own ships turned against them. Human technical specialists had spent years learning coalition technology, and when the war began, they proved they could use that knowledge to devastating effect. Agent Paul Carter had been the architect of that victory. For 3 years he had worked as a maintenance technician on coalition vessels, learning every detail of their computer systems and security protocols. When the shooting started, he had turned an entire coalition fleet into human weapons with nothing more than a few lines of computer code. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Commander Paul Carter," reported the communications officer. "He's aboard the coalition command ship in the Centauri system." Lavra activated the secure channel, and Paul's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, she could see coalition officers working at their stations, apparently unaware that a human agent was standing in their most secure facility. "General Martin, this is Agent Carter reporting from the Coalition High Command," Paul said in a casual tone that would have been impossible for any other species to maintain while surrounded by enemies. "I have some interesting information about their current strategic planning." "Go ahead, Paul." "It seems the coalition leadership is having what you might call a difference of opinion. Half of them want to sue for peace immediately, while the other half is talking about using their planet-killer weapons against human colonies. The problem is they can't agree on which colonies to target, and they're spending more time arguing with each other than fighting us." Lavra wasn't surprised. Humanity had studied coalition psychology for decades, and they knew that the alien alliance was held together by shared aggression rather than mutual trust. Under pressure, that alliance would fracture along species lines as each member put their own survival first. "Can you prevent them from using those planet killers?" Lavra asked. Paul's smile was predatory. "General, I've been working on their computer systems for 3 years. If they try to fire those weapons, they're going to get a very unpleasant surprise about who's really in control of their targeting systems." The transmission ended, and Lavra turned her attention to other fronts in the war. On the main display, she could see human fleets moving through coalition space like a virus spreading through a body. Every system they entered became a human system. Every coalition stronghold they attacked became a human base. But this wasn't random destruction. Humanity had learned the lessons of their own history. They knew that crushing an enemy completely often created more problems than it solved. Instead, they were demonstrating the futility of resistance while offering clear paths to surrender, and COPERATION Dr. Amy Johnson worked in her laboratory aboard the research station New Geneva, putting the finishing touches on technologies that would reshape galactic civilization. The gravity weapons she had developed during the war were just the beginning. Now she was working on medical technologies that could heal coalition prisoners, transportation systems that would make interstellar travel faster and safer, and communication networks that would connect every world in the galaxy. "Dr. Johnson, General Martin wants to speak with you," announced her assistant, Lieutenant Karen Price. Amy activated the communication panel, and General Martin's face appeared on the screen. "Amy, how are our reconstruction projects coming along?" "Better than expected, General. The medical facilities on the liberated coalition worlds are already treating human and alien patients together. It turns out that showing mercy to former enemies is a very effective form of psychological warfare." Amy was right. Coalition soldiers who had expected torture and execution instead received medical treatment and decent food. Coalition civilians who had been told that humans were monsters found themselves protected by human soldiers from the chaos of their collapsing government. Word of human mercy spread through coalition space faster than their fleets could advance. "What about the infrastructure projects?" General Martin asked. "We're ahead of schedule there, too. The coalition worlds we've occupied are already seeing improvements in their power grids, transportation networks, and communication systems. Our engineers are showing them technologies they never imagined possible. This was perhaps humanity's most devastating weapon. They weren't just conquering coalition worlds, they were improving them. Citizens who had lived under coalition rule for generations suddenly had access to clean water, reliable power, and medical care that their own governments had never provided." Commander Steve Reynolds stood on the bridge of the UN's Phantom, watching as another coalition fleet surrendered without firing a shot. It was becoming a common occurrence. Coalition commanders would see human ships approaching, remember what had happened to their colleagues who chose to fight, and decide that discretion was the better part of valor. "Commander, we're receiving a surrender transmission from the coalition." Task Force, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Mike Foster. They're asking for terms. Standard offer, Steve replied. Full surrender, disarmament, and cooperation with human authorities. In exchange, we guarantee the safety of their crews and humane treatment according to galactic law. It was the same offer humanity had made to every coalition force they encountered. Some accepted immediately. Others tried to fight and were destroyed with ruthless efficiency. Word spread quickly about which choice led to survival, and which led to death. The coalition's unity finally shattered completely when the Nexari government announced they were withdrawing from the alliance and seeking a separate peace with humanity. Within hours, 3 other coalition species followed suit. Leaving the Zephyrians isolated and facing the full might of human forces alone, War Master Thekvoar, one of the few coalition commanders to survive the Battle of Earth, found himself in command of a shrinking fleet on the run from human pursuit forces. His once mighty alliance had crumbled, his homeworld was under siege, and his own officers were beginning to question his leadership. War Master, the humans are offering us terms, reported his aide, Captain Velmore. They promise safe passage to neutral space if we surrender all military assets and agree to war crimes tribunals for our leadership. Thekvoar's forearms clenched into fists. We will not surrender to prey animals. We are Zephyrians. We do not bow to inferior species. Sir, with respect, they've proven they're not inferior. Their technology is more advanced than ours, their tactics are superior, and their soldiers fight with a determination we've never encountered. Maybe it's time to admit we were wrong about them. Thekvoar turned on his aide with murderous intent. But before he could speak, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Human forces had found them again, and this time there would be no escape. General Lavra Martin received the report of Thekvoar's capture with satisfaction but not joy. The War Master would face trial for his war crimes, but his fate was less important than the message his defeat would send to the rest of the galaxy. Ma'am, we're receiving surrender offers from the last 3 coalition strongholds, reported Major Henderson. They're asking for the same terms we've offered everyone else. Grant them, Lavara said. But make sure they understand that this surrender includes full cooperation with our investigation into the prison camps and research facilities. Fleet Admiral Chris Thompson stood on the observation deck of the UNS Unity, watching cargo ships deliver supplies to the former coalition world of Nexus Prime 6 months ago. This planet had been a military stronghold where human prisoners were tortured in underground laboratories. Today, it was a thriving colony where humans and aliens work side by side to build something better than either species had achieved alone. Admiral, the morning reports are ready, announced Captain Linda Hayes, approaching with a data tablet in her hands. Linda had been one of the merchant captains whose ship had revealed its true nature during the war. Now she served as Chris's aide, helping to manage the complex process of rebuilding a galaxy. What's the status on the refugee resettlement program? Chris asked, taking the tablet and scanning the numbers. Better than expected. We've relocated over 2 million former coalition citizens to worlds where they can start new lives. The Zephyrian civilians are adapting well to human administration, especially the younger generation. Chris nodded, pleased but not surprised. One of humanity's greatest strengths was their ability to win over former enemies. The same empathy that had made them seek peace for so long now helped them integrate defeated populations into their growing galactic community. Through the observation window, Chris could see construction crews working on new buildings that mixed human engineering with alien architectural styles. It was a symbol of what the galaxy was becoming under human leadership, not a conquered territory, but a cooperative civilization where the best ideas from every species could flourish. Ambassador Tony Evans walked through the halls of the new Galactic Council building on Earth, preparing for another day of meetings with representatives from dozens of species. The building itself had been constructed in record time, its design incorporating elements from every major galactic civilization to show that humanity valued diversity even as they led the galaxy. Ambassador Evans, the Corvani delegation is here for their trade negotiation meeting, announced his assistant, Secretary Karen White. They seem very eager to finalize the agreement. Tony smiled. The Corvani had been neutral during the war, but they had watched humanity's victory with great interest. Now they wanted to join the growing network of species that benefited from human protection and technology. Send them in, Karen, and make sure they get the full presentation on our new medical technologies. I think they'll be particularly interested in our cancer treatment protocols. The Corvani delegation entered the room, their tall, graceful forms moving with the careful precision that characterized their species. Their leader, Ambassador Kethnal, had been dealing with humans for only a few months, but he had already learned to respect their combination of technological advancement and genuine concern for other species. Ambassador Evans, we are honored by your willingness to share such advanced medical knowledge with our people, Kethnal said in accented but clear English. Our scientists estimate that your treatments could extend the average Corvani lifespan by 30%. That's what cooperation is about, Tony replied. Humanity learned long ago that we're stronger when we help others become stronger too. Your people have artistic and philosophical traditions that we can learn from. Together we can build something greater than either of us could achieve alone. This was the heart of humanity's new galactic order. Unlike the coalition, which had been based on fear and domination, the Human Lead Alliance offered genuine benefits to every member species. Advanced technology, medical treatments, protection from aggression, and most importantly, a voice in their own governance. Dr. Amy Johnson worked in her new laboratory on Europa Base, developing technologies that would have seemed like magic to earlier generations. The gravity manipulation systems that had won the war were now being adapted for peaceful purposes. Faster-than-light travel, planetary engineering, and energy generation that could power entire star systems. Dr. Johnson, we just received a request from the Ethereal Research Consortium, announced her assistant, Dr. Mike Roberts. They want to collaborate on developing new transportation networks that could connect every inhabited world in the galaxy. Looked up from her work, considering the implications. That would create a communication and travel network spanning thousands of light years. The economic and social benefits would be enormous. There's more, Mike continued. They're offering to share their expertise in quantum field manipulation. Combined with our gravity control technology, we could potentially develop instantaneous travel between any 2 points in the galaxy. Amy nodded thoughtfully. This was exactly the kind of project that showed why humanity's approach was working. Instead of hoarding their technological advantages, they shared them with species that proved trustworthy. In return, they gained access to alien knowledge and capabilities that enhanced their own research. Set up the collaboration, Amy decided. But make sure all the safeguards are in place. We want to help our allies, but we also need to ensure this technology doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Captain Jake Morrison found himself assigned to a very different kind of mission than he had expected when the war ended. Instead of commanding a warship, he now captained a hospital ship that traveled to former coalition worlds, providing medical care to populations that had been neglected by their previous governments. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the surface, reported his medical officer, Dr. Sarah Martinez. The local Zephyrian government is requesting additional medical supplies for their pediatric ward, Jake smiled. 6 months ago, Zephyrian military leaders had been trying to kill human children. Now Zephyrian doctors were working with human medical teams to save alien children. It was a transformation that would have seemed impossible during the dark days of the war. Send down whatever they need, Jake ordered. And see if we can spare some of our medical staff to help train their doctors in the new treatment protocols. The hospital ship Yon's Mercy had become a symbol of humanity's approach to victory. Instead of exploiting their defeated enemies, humans were investing in their rehabilitation and growth. Former coalition worlds that had lived under military rule were now experiencing prosperity and freedom that their previous governments had never provided. General Lavra Martin stood before the Galactic Council, delivering humanity's annual report on the state of galactic security. The council chamber was filled with representatives from over 40 species, all of them now part of the human-led alliance that had replaced the old coalition. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, Lavra began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. 1 year ago, this galaxy was divided by fear and aggression. Species fought species, and the strong preyed upon the weak. Today, we have built something better. She gestured to a holographic display that showed trade routes connecting hundreds of worlds, medical aid flowing to developing civilizations, and joint research projects that involved multiple species working together. The coalition believed that power came from the ability to destroy. They were wrong. True power comes from the ability to build, to heal, and to protect those who cannot protect themselves. In the audience, former coalition species sat alongside longtime human allies, all of them now working together to solve the galaxy's problems. The Nexari had become experts in interstellar agriculture, feeding worlds that had previously struggled with famine. The Corvani had established art academies that preserved and shared cultural traditions from dozens of species. Even some Zephyrians had found new roles in the galactic community. Their natural aggression, properly channeled, made them excellent peacekeepers and defenders of worlds that faced external threats. Humanity did not seek this leadership role, Lavar continued. It was forced upon us by those who mistook our desire for peace as a sign of weakness. But now that we have accepted this responsibility, we will use it to ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between submission and extinction. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. We have learned that the greatest strength any species can possess is not the ability to wage war, but the wisdom to prevent it. That wisdom comes from understanding that we are all stronger when we work together than when we fight alone. The speech concluded to applause from representatives who remembered what the galaxy had been like under coalition rule. They had lived in fear of their neighbors, afraid that any sign of weakness would invite attack. Now they lived in a community where cooperation was rewarded and aggression was met with overwhelming force from the human-led alliance. Commander Beth Turner walked through the streets of New Geneva, city on the former coalition world of Kepler 442b. The city had been completely rebuilt after the war. Its new design incorporating the best architectural principles from human and alien civilizations. Children of multiple species played together in parks that had once been military compounds. "Commander, the integration report is ready," announced Lieutenant Danny Brooks, approaching with a satisfied expression. Danny had been instrumental in establishing the new government on Kepler 442b, helping former coalition citizens transition to democratic rule. "How are our former enemies adapting?" "To freedom?" Beth asked. "Better than we hoped."